r/ask Reddit. What's the craziest crime you or somebody in your family has committed? My friend got blackout drunk and stole a bulldozer that had the keys left in it. He turned it on and obviously didn't know how to drive it, so he just ended up making the scoopy part go up and down for a bit before the cops came. They actually let him go too. My dad brought in a banana tree to the US from his home village in Kerala. He literally walked through customs with a tree in a pot in his arms. The customs lady asked him what he was thinking and he just replied that the banana tree was from his mother's garden. The customs lady must have thought my dad was crazy, but she just let him walk right through. We still have that tree and its offspring. Customs lady, this is crazy. Your dad. No, this is bananas. My grandfather's cousin stabbed a waiter to death because he wouldn't let him use the employees only restroom in his restaurant. A distant cousin got her terminally ill father to give her power of attorney and then stole all of his money so she wouldn't have to split it with her brother. Edit. Don't worry, she did go to jail as her rush to clean him out involved a lot of fraud and forgery. Edit 2. Man, it is slightly depressing how many of you have similar stories. What's up with people? A guy I went to school with in the 70s emptied his dementia-ridden father's life savings while he lived with him. 60-some years old, and still stealing to support his coke habit. His sister found out, and he did 5 years. Restitution, $80k. No way he'll live long enough to pay that back. And 8 years probation. It's not a bad crime or anything, but it was illegal at the time, so, in Germany, up until a few years ago, we still had a general draft for the army, and a generation ago it was very hard to get out of it. My uncle was a hardcore pacifist, so going to the army wasn't an option for him. But being accepted as a conscientious objector at that time basically required you to be a devout Christian and use the Bible as an argument for why you couldn't kill another human. And my uncle was also atheist. He couldn't realistically object, didn't want to go to the army and didn't want to go to jail, too, so he waited. He got sent his draft notice, passed the physical and got a letter telling him to report to X company under Sergeant Y. He wrote back a reply, on rose-colored paper, scented with perfume, about how much he was looking forward to serving under the strong leadership of Y, promising to obey every one of his orders, and that he can't wait to experience life in the barracks together with so many strong and muscular men. He was declared unfit for service shortly after. My dad, when he was much younger and infinitely more stupid, regularly used to drink drive with his friends. It was the early 70s, and no one really cared. To hear him speak about it now, he can't believe how stupid he was. One night, he and his friend were out drinking. They heard there was a party going on at a pub across town and decided to head over. On the way they go past a large club with a queue of people waiting to go in. My dad decides to show off a bit and pull a skid. He miscalculated, hit a curb and flipped the car, sliding down the road on his roof. The car stops. They get out and leg it, to the cheers of the people in the queue. They get the bus back home and immediately call the police to report the car is stolen. The police knew what had happened, but couldn't prove anything. So your dad's story to the cops was the car was stolen and the thieves crashed it? If you have a police report about a stolen car, your insurance handles it differently than if you destroy it yourself. It's a whole new felony, but hey, it might work out and we've already established that the driver doesn't make good decisions. Cousin got busted robbing a bank, got sentenced to jail, proceeded to break out of jail with his cellmate and went on the run. Fast forward a few months and he's living in a hotel room with his cellmate. Cellmate orders a pizza to the room. Bad idea. Delivery guy recognized them and reported them to the police. They get arrested again and shortly after my cousin killed himself in prison. My cousin had a wife and a kid and got into a nasty coke habit. We don't bring him up anymore. I need to sleep soon. I read this too fast and saw broke out of jail with his cellmate living in hotel room and pizza and thought you were just describing the plot to Home Alone 2. My dad told me he once snuck into a tire warehouse. He cut the alarm and came in through a window on the roof and stole a bunch of tires. I guess, after that, he retired from his life of crime. I worked at a movie theater when Back to the Future was originally released. We used to take the entire movie ticket instead of tearing them and resell them to the next group coming in. The old theater was massive, Sat 600 people. We probably made about $15,000 between two of us in month or so. Adjusted for inflation, it's about $37,000. We were the richest high school kids in our town. Didn't the theater suspect that something was going on? I mean, thousands of people watching it, but official ticket sales are a few hundred people. You'd be surprised how little theater managers care, as long as those people are buying concessions. Friend is a manager at a local theater and he hands out those complimentary tickets like candy on Halloween. Haven't had to pay for a movie in like a year before COVID, but always buy a large popcorn to help out. An uncle robbed a bank, or was an accessory to the robbers. IDK. His brilliant escape when the police showed up was to go to the roof and jump off. He didn't do time, just had to go to the hospital for a broken leg. I'll have to ask my mom when I get the chance. She knows the story better than I do. Aim for the bushes. My uncle sold Tim Allen the cocaine that got him sent to prison in the late 70s. So did Tim rat out your uncle? Sure did. Then my uncle ratted out others. I honestly don't know much about it beyond that. Don't have much contact with that part of the family. My uncle was a pathological liar and a very troubled guy. He died by suicide about 10 years ago. Not really a crime, as in not necessarily illegal, but my grandfather had two separate families in two different cities, named both of his firstborn sons after himself, and they both named sons after themselves too, including me. So I share my name with my father and grandfather, as well as a half uncle and at least one cousin. I'd like to imagine that this is how a name becomes too common. Or you could be like my cousin's dad, whose father named him and all of his male siblings Hugh. That was his name too. They all had different middle names which they went by. Reminds me of the Bach family, where many of them were named Johann Sebastian being the most famous. My husband's dad killed the guy who his then girlfriend was cheating on him with. He was supposed to serve a life term but got out because of a clerical error. He did manual labor on a local park and apparently the guys who helped were supposed to get a reduced sentence. However, he was not supposed to. I think my husband talked about it once. Also, my husband's half-brother, same murderous dad, killed his business partner. He would have gotten away with it, however. He moved the body when he found out construction was going to start in that spot. And what were they going to build there? A prison. He's currently serving a life sentence. My husband has never met his half-brother. He also has two half-sisters from the same dad who are law-abiding citizens. Two half-sisters that didn't get caught. Not sure if it should be considered a crime, but one of my great-aunts was in an abusive marriage with a war vet who took to beating her and forcing her to play Russian roulette when he drank. One night she managed to rig the gun so when he took his turn he blew his brains out. She wasn't charged. I'm glad she survived. Many women don't. How scary that must have been for her. My uncle was a small drug lord in Northern California in the 90s. He had a compound out in Gold Country. Had to drive through 3 gates with guards to get to his house. I never questioned it as a kid. Just enjoyed heading up so I could fish in the stocked base pond, which also had snapping turtles, as a line of defense. He'd take me out shopping at the mall with a film canister full of coke that he'd take hits off of occasionally, shadowed by some bodyguards. One time we were out for a ride in his Corvette going well over 100 and got tagged by highway patrol. He talked his way out of the ticket, told the officer he was showing off for his nephew and got carried away. The officer thought it was hilarious and told me it was lucky since he had a ton of illegal guns and drugs in the trunk and would have made a run for it. He got arrested when I was 15. It was a full-blown. Feds descended upon the compound in helicopters and swung through the windows with flashbangs. The whole nine. He was arrested, and since if he snitched on anyone above him he was, very bluntly, a dead man. He took the rap, was extradited to Lee in VA to serve a bit over 10 years. All he asked for while he was there was protein powder. He got prison ripped, and apparently beat someone near to death with a sock full of quarters for cutting in front of him at the payphone. At some point in my life all 4 of my uncles on both sides plus my dad have spent time in prison for drug-related offenses. But this particular uncle takes the cake. I hate to break it to you, but your uncle was not a small drug lord. My granddad accidentally shot his brother in the ass. He meant to shoot something out of his hand, but missed. Drunk, Genius. Hillbilly shit. Thankfully my dad married well, and I turned out alright. Hold on. He was trying to shoot something out of his hand, and he missed and hit him in the ass. I'm gonna need more story. Or maybe your granddad is just a horrendous shot. My dad's cousin erased all family member names from a property deed except for his father's. The paperwork had been water damaged, so there was no easy way to tell what should have been there. Family law says that he also paid off some local politicians' office workers to make the new deed stand. One time my uncle put ranch dressing on a dry-aged NY strip steak that cost $70. Got stoned, drunk and rode an electric scooter with a friend, only to end up in front of a huge fence with barbed wire I decided to climb. Huge mistake, it was a military base. I ran out of there at speed light when I realized. Fortunately I escaped. My grandfather was often drunk, but when he wasn't drunk he would pretend to be drunk so that the Soviet Communist Party members responsible for interrogating all those who might be opposed to communism thought and said, "Hey, he's a drunk. We'll question him last." This gave him time to gather resources so he could escape with my dad. So, although public inebriation probably almost certainly wasn't a crime in most Eastern European countries at the time, late 40s, he would have been gulag bound if he'd been caught in this charade. In college we got a new printer and printed off a bunch of fairly convincing $20 bills. Roughed them up and used them at a bunch of fast food restaurants. Didn't realize how dumb it was until years later. Back in the late 90s, two boys I lifeguarded with in the summer were arrested for making fake money. I was actually shocked, because they were both good kids, and seemed pretty straight. Apparently they had a whole suite set up, and the FBI investigated them for a year before arresting. Neither served any time, since they were 16 and no priors, and assume parents got great lawyers. One is an engineer now, no clue about the other. My father, when I was still very young, used a fake name and pretended to be a wedding planner for a young couple. That young couple hired him, since he seemed trustworthy and is an excellent liar, giving him access to their savings for wedding supplies and such that would be needed. Instead, he stole all of the money out of their account and then ran away with it. As far as I am aware, he was never caught and the money was never returned to them. The worst part is that the poor couple never even got their wedding and had almost nothing left afterwards. My grandpa wouldn't obey the train warnings. He would try and beat the train rather than wait. First time he got hit in his new convertible on the way to prom with my grandma. Had barely started on the payments and car was totaled. Luckily they were both okay. Second time was a little less reckless but still dumb. He was driving a semi and it broke down on the tracks. He kept trying to get the tractor trailer to start, rather than lose his rig and load. Semi got hit by the train. Total loss and ducked up his back. A member of my family once took part in an armed insurrection against the United States. He even led an army that was part of that insurrection. The state of Virginia just removed his statue from the US Capitol building. My uncle started a fight in his regular pub in his 20s after they tried to charge him an extra 10p for his usual lager and lime. 10p for the lime. He kicked the shit out of the bartender, broke a police officer's nose, and it took 8 of them to bring him down in the end, I believe. He still boasts to this day about how he came out of prison with more criminal knowledge than he went in with and how he used to make metal hooks for the other prisoners which they'd use to scale the fences to try and escape. He thinks it makes him sound cool and edgy, but he's such a donghead. Can't stand him. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.